Hello, hello. Welcome to the My Journey series. This is episode 10. It has been a while again. Apologies for that. Let's move on. If you have not caught up to episode 10, you have 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 to catch up on. They are chronological. So if you've caught this episode and you're wondering what the hell is going on, it obviously goes in order. So you need to wind back to whatever you've missed. And if you're new to this, start at episode 1. But we're going to get straight into this one. This episode is, I guess, when shit started to get real for me off the court. This is where some issues arise slowly. It was this season. We'll get to that shortly. But we finished last season, or the last episode, with the 06-07 season, my second year in the NBA. This one is going to talk about my 07-08 season, which then feeds into an Olympic Games, which was in Beijing. But first and foremost, there's the off-season. So I finished the season 06-07 with an injury that, you know, if you listen to that episode, it wasn't really an injury. I could have played on it, so I didn't really have to rehab anything specifically. Just had to get a little bit stronger in the ankle and the calf and the foot, but it wasn't bothering me or anything. So took about a month off again and then got back to Melbourne. And it was time to get nitty-gritty with the old trainer, Steve. And this was the first off-season that I kind of had a proper structured off-season. What I mean by that is before my rookie year, there was all the draft stuff. There was Summer League, which then went into my NBA season, which then went into an off-season with the World Championships, which then went straight into another NBA season. This was the first off-season I had nothing, and we were done in April. We were obviously didn't make the playoffs, so we were done. So I had from April to October 1 to structure a proper training regime, getting stronger, all that kind of stuff. And that's what Steve, my trainer, used to froth at. He used to love putting those things together, and he was pretty good at it, I'm not going to lie. But the off-seasons were crazy. At one point, he had me doing 3-a-days, which was, you know, beyond sensible. What I mean by 3-a-days was 3 sessions a day. Most Euro coaches and European teams do 2-a-days. NBA teams do 2-a-days for 5 days in training camp. He wanted me to do 3-a-days basically for the whole off-season. And we started off with it and it wasn't an issue, and I was just hammered after it. And then he tweaked it to 2-a-days, which is still hard enough. But he, you know, if I remember correctly, it was a lighter session in the morning with some sort of shooting, bit of conditioning, and then it was some sort of weights in the mid-afternoon, and then at night it was a hardcore shooting session, a lot of shots up. So a lot to do, and I wasn't against the work. It just was nonsensical. I was in my car, you know, 3 separate times a day to get back and forward, and it, you know, after a week of it, absolutely hammered. I think he realised that some of the workouts, you know, just so fatigued and hammered and legs and everything. But I'm not sure if that was strategic by him, that he just wanted to do a week or 2 of it because that's how long it lasted, and then he was going to tone it back just to test me out. And we got through it. But this was an off season that I put on a shitload of muscle. I was still floating around 240 pounds, 245 pounds, maybe close to 250 at the end of the season, and which is what in kilos for your Aussies, it's 105, 110 ballpark. And he wanted me to get bigger and stronger. These were the days of Shaquille O'Neal and Yao Ming and Dwight Howard and Pau Gasol and a lot of big bruisers, Kendrick Perkins, Al Jefferson. So there was a lot of big brute. It's not what we see today with the center position, lean, more long and skinnier guys. A little bit of strength there, but no big, strong, mammoth human beings. So that's what it was back then. So he, you know, I lifted like an animal that off season, and I got noticeably bigger. I felt very, very strong and was throwing weights around and all that, but I felt like I lost my agility a little bit with it. I felt like I got too bulky, and a big strength of my game was a big man that had a quick first step, could turn and face, could go by guys, especially those slower bigs. So now it felt like I was trying to match their strength, but then it was taking away what I utilized and what was my strength, right? So anyhow, I went into that season pretty heavy and just didn't feel like I was moving as freely. So my movement went out of the window, but I tell you what, I could put people in the basket. I could back guys down and get them 2 or 3 feet from the basket and put the ball in the hole. But I just didn't feel like I had my mobility like usual. Another interesting thing I did this off-season was got a stupid haircut. I had a rat's tail. So for those of you familiar and followed my career, you would have known I had a bunch of stupid haircuts, as we do as young kids. And it's equivalent probably to today's, what are they called? Frohawk mullet things, whatever these kids are rocking, the latest football player wears, like the superstar football player wears. Like mine was a rat tail for some reason. And I had my big, long, buffy hair. And in the off-season, I just decided I'm going to shave my head. And then I just left the ratty at the back and got my girlfriend at the time to plait it and had some fun with it like an idiot and got a lot of shit for it. But that was that. This was the infamous off-season of a contentious article that I did. Not like me to be, towing the line on things, but I did an article. Look, I came back from that NBA season pretty bitter and disappointed about everything, really. I thought, the NBA wasn't what I thought it was. It was very business-like, as I mentioned numerous times. A lot of fake people that you cannot trust. And it is what it is. This isn't disparaging the NBA. This is factual. You have to navigate that. You have to cope with the realization that a GM or a coach is going to tell you the best thing since sliced bread and trade you the next day. It's that cutthroat, right? But then the human element goes out of the window when you're, breaking bread with someone and then the next day they're like, oh, we'll move him for someone else if we can get someone better. So the friendships are really hollow. So I started to realize that and pick up on it. You bring your hands in as a team, family first, family 1, 2, 3, and then it's not family for the most part. Most teams. I mean, I was blessed to be on one in Golden State that really was that close, but I can tell you for a fact 25 out of the 30-odd teams don't have that chemistry, and I was on one of those for the first 7, 8, 9 years of my career. So anyhow, I did an article. I was talking freely with a journalist, probably my first or second mistake with talking too openly to a journalist, and I didn't realize he'd paint the article this way. I was just talking openly, and it was I think it was labeled the article of bling bling, because of some of my comments, and basically it was an article that was talking about my first couple of years, how I felt, how I was homesick off the floor, trying to fit in the NBA, and I just basically went at NBA culture a little bit. I said, it wasn't two-team first, and I did an article just chatting freely and openly about it, and it was probably 5% of the chat, but the article ended up being penned completely about that. So, it sounded as though that's all I wanted to talk about and that's all that, was penned. But I talked about everything, having family visit, the ups and downs of on court, off the court, a lot of the travel. None of that was in the article. So, yeah, I mean, that's just journalism 101 that you learn, that he had something that was going to be very, very clickbaity, and God bless him, he ran with it. But I said things along the lines of, I didn't enjoy, the hip-hop crap. For those who don't know, I was big into hip-hop and even rap and R&B as a young fella in the 90s, and that was kind of my era of that kind of music, where it was a bit less machiney, if that makes sense, and you could understand a bit more of what was being said and whatnot, and that was kind of, Tupac and all that. I was big in all that as a young fella. So it wasn't necessarily a slide at the whole genre. It was a slide at the current hip-hop and rap, which I still can't stand to this day. So I clipped hip-hop and rap. I said, look, the stereotypes in the NBA are somewhat true. There's a lot of girls around on the road. There's a lot of those distractions, and some guys indulge, some guys don't, but that's definitely true. The fancy cars, that's all over the place. People spending money and flaunting it or flossing, as they say today. The ridiculous jewelry that I saw some crazy chains and necklaces with, $200,000-$300,000 worth of diamonds on them. And I thought this was all pretty obvious and factual. It was kind of like I was shitting on all of it when I wasn't really shitting on it. I thought it was obvious. This was part of the culture. So I got a lot of shit because NBA culture was then deemed to be black culture. So people then, said, do I have a problem with black people? And do I have, am I racist? All that kind of stuff that comes with it. And my point was, I had teammates who were not American who were indulging the same thing. I definitely pinned it more towards NBA culture than specifically to a skin color. Now I can understand if you start talking about hip hop and rap and jewelry and fancy cars, that you can kind of, it does definitely go more towards black culture. But that was never my point, and I'm not backtracking now by any means. I stand by what I said, and what I said was factual. It is what it is. Like it is a league where all those things are true. Now, it's not supposed to be spoken about. That's the problem. And it was spoken about. So I got a bit of pushback with that. I think Eton Thomas penned an open letter to me, all that kind of stuff. But no one had actually followed up to really have a, get deep into what I was talking about. They just saw it in print, and it looked like I just did an article about shitting on the NBA and black culture, quote unquote, which was never the case. I was shitting on NBA culture because it can be very, very poisonous and toxic. And if what I'm saying is not true, by all means pick me up on it. But I'm pretty sure it is true because I was in those locker rooms and those airplanes at that point for 3 years. I was on to my third year and I saw it on a daily basis. I saw, how toxic the culture could be. I saw how there were groups in locker rooms of 2 or 3 people that hated the other 2 or 3 players. And then I saw guys fighting for rebounds. I'm going to put out there, I saw guys fighting for the same girls in nightclubs and certain girls seeing 2 or 3 guys on a team. I saw all that, right? So, for people to think that was anything to do with race or anything to do with that, it's not the case, but it was the truth. So I'm going to stand by those comments. But if people want to take it down the path of, you were having a shot at, black culture, well, that's your opinion. My opinion, I wasn't. I was having a shot at NBA culture. And like I said, there were people on my team in numerous years there and on opposing teams that I hung out with who were from overseas and indulged in the same thing. So that is what it is, but it caused a big stink. Look, some of my teammates were not too happy with me. I didn't realize how big it was until I got back to training camp that year and in the 07, 08 year, and I got the cold shoulder from a few of the guys. Not all. I think Desmond Mason was one that I had a chat to, and he kind of, once we had a chat, understood where I was coming from, but he was like, as a veteran, he's like, young fella, you can't say that because people are going to take it one way, especially in this league. And I understood that. I definitely understood it, but I also understood that I can't, it's not my problem that if somebody, interprets something the wrong way, even though I'm telling them it's not that way, it is what it is, right? People are going to jump down that jump the gun on that. I'm not going to continue to argue about it and try to say, oh no, I'm not that, I'm not that. If you think I am that, all right, go for it, man. Like I'm not going to lose sleep over it, but yeah, it definitely caused some problems. There were a few players that definitely noticed the game of the cold shoulder, and it was what it was. My whole thinking of it was like, is this any different to how it was last year anyway? Like our team was dysfunctional. Guys went together off the court anyway. Everyone did their own thing, or there were little cliques, 3 or 4 cliques within the team. So what difference was it? It's not like we're hanging out and breaking bread like some of the better teams that I've been on. So my whole mindset around that was nothing's really lost. Like and to be honest, it only lasted for a couple of weeks. It was probably a week of training camp and then maybe a week of preseason, and then once we got on the floor and battling other teams, I think guys kind of forgot about it, and it didn't last too long. But like I said, it is what it is. I made those comments. I stand by them. The article was obviously penned to be a bit more controversial than it was, and that was my first foray into being careful to what you say in the media. And that's the very reason I'm doing this podcast. Is some of these podcasts are an hour long. The basketball one's 2 hours long. The In Conversation series, the My Journey series, and it just lets me talk and really give my point of view. If you grab a portion of what I just spoke about and put it in an article in print that now is being read and deciphered by someone else's brain and mind, there's all kinds of labels you could put on me. And I get that. That's the landscape. But that's the reason I'm doing this podcast and doing podcasts, because I can get my point of view out on different things without being clickbaited. Because you know what? If you grab a 1 minute clip out of this and print it, I can then cite the other 15 minutes of that of what I just spoke about. And that's the problem with the media today, is they're going to put what's clickbaity out there. It's going to be in the headline to clickbait you and drag you in to read it. And then it's going to make things as controversial as possible. So people get riled up. Oh, I'm going to go online and tweet this guy. What an idiot! Oh, I can't believe he said that. Or and that's the reality of what you deal with when you're in the spotlight. And there's pros and cons with media, and that's one of the cons. You got to learn how to navigate it. So from there on, you obviously learn. Shit, I got to be careful with how I can't. I've always tried to be very, very honest with media, but I grew to learn. I got to word this differently, because if I give a sentence and that sentence is bad, even though the next 4 sentences are like, oh no, that makes sense now, they won't put the other 4 sentences in. That's just the reality of what we're dealing with. So that was interesting. My first real foray into journalism in the NBA and how you can get stung. And I don't think that journalists did anything different from what he normally do. It's just. It goes with the grain. They're trying to sell papers and have eyeballs attached to headlines. So that was what it was. Real settled in Milwaukee. As I said last episode, bought a house in a suburb called Mequon, which was about 30 minutes north of downtown. I don't know if I mentioned in the last podcast, but get this. I bought an 1.5 acre brand new home, 5 bedrooms, basement, games room, all brand new, for $1,090,000. Now, I'm not saying that to brag that I bought $1 million home, but we circle forward 10, 15 odd years and what properties are going for, at least in Australia. That property in Australia today, if it was within 30 minutes of Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane, that size with that parcel of land, probably you're looking at 7, 8, 9, 10 million, I'd assume, if not more. So got a bargain of a home, loved it. We were kind of out in the burbs, close to some other small little towns. Cedarburg was north of Mequon. It was a town that was, a little paved road and little mum and pop shop front stores. Awesome place to live and raise a family. And we lived in a little subdivision with about 20 odd houses. Charlie Bell was my neighbour. He was on the other side. He bought the biggest house in the area. So he had a very nice house, indoor pool and everything for Charlie Bell. So we'd go over there a little bit and hang out with him. But that was all beautiful. Like I said, indulged in snowmobiles and four-wheelers. Had 2 huskies that we had, which fit in very, very well with all the snow and everything like that. And I also bought and purchased a home in Victoria at the time. So for myself, now I purchased my parents a home in Patterson Lakes, Victoria, and I also purchased myself a home in Patterson Lakes, Victoria. So that's where I was based in the off-season, and that is why my practice facility was in a place called Carrum Downs in Victoria, which was about a 10-minute drive from Patterson Lakes down the freeway, a nice easy drive. And Patterson Lakes is one of the few areas in Melbourne, Victoria, where you can live on a canal that leads to the ocean. So a lot of people park their boats in the backyard, pull up to your house. Very nice area. Was very undervalued at that time. It's gone up a fair bit since then, but it is about 40 minutes from the city though, so a bit of a hike, but nonetheless a beautiful area. Let's get to some numbers. So I had a really good year numbers-wise. I averaged 14.3 points, 9.8 rebounds, 2.6 assists and 1.7 blocks, 51% from the field. Played 78 games that year, so still relatively healthy. I think I missed 4 games with an odd knock here or there before they, this was before the times of random rest periods for guys. They just tell you you're not playing tonight, we're going to rest you. But 78 games out of 72. Once again, we didn't make the playoffs. Larry Krasowiak, probably about the midpoints of the season, we figured he was a lame duck coach. He signed a cheap, I think, 2-year contract, and it was for not much at all. And what I mean by lame duck is when you've got a coach on a low-term contract like that, very easy to fire, very easy to move on from, and that's exactly what happened. Michael Redd led us with 22 a night. Mo Williams was 17 a night. We had no balance or flow. We had, we were herky-jerky offensively. I know Larry Kay was trying to put in the triangle at that time, especially with me at the 5 to have a lot of back cuts and all of that. Michael Redd and Mo were definitely more attuned to being isolated. Michael Redd was great coming off pin downs, so he wasn't great in the triangle. He was great coming off pin downs, shooting that 3-ball, and Mo Williams was really good off the dribble to score, like just a scoring point guard. So to them, the triangle didn't make sense, but for me it did because it utilised my strength. So like I said, no balance, no flow. I felt like, Larry Kay was pretty much knew he was done. About 30 to 40 games in the season, we had a horrendous record. He pretty much knew. And with what was funny was in our practice facility at Milwaukee there, which was out in the burbs. It was at an old, I think, now defunct Catholic school. We had a little facility there, and there was windows. So on the second floor around the court, there was windows overlooking the practice court, right? And that's where all offices were. And it was the old school windows that you could open like at school, like you just kind of half open them. Anyway, like back then, you'd come to practice. If practice was at 10 a.m., you get in at whatever time you wanted to get in to do some extra work or get some shots up or get taped, get a massage, get physio, get in the weight room, whatever. But around about, quarter to 10, 15 minutes before the practice is supposed to start, everyone's already on the court shooting and just starting to get warm. And the way it usually works is your coach comes down right on 10, right when you start, and you either go to the film room and watch some film or you get straight into practice, right? It got so bad there that Larry Kay would just basically open the window and go, all right, guys, just get your shots in with your coaches, whoever your specific shooting coaches are, and we'll see you tomorrow. Because the season was such a shit show that we didn't even bother practicing the last 20-odd games of the season. So that's when you knew shit was hitting the fan. I just remember just almost poke his head out the window. All right, guys, just do what you got to do and we'll see you tomorrow. And guys would get shots up and leave, and it was interesting in that aspect. He knew he was gone. He was probably pissed about that. And as far as us players, we knew we couldn't make the playoffs. So it was a dead rubber of a season that we had to move on from. Like I said, my numbers weren't horrible, pretty good numbers. Growth continued to go up. I started playing really well individually, some big rebound nights, just started to get comfortable out there. It was coming together at both ends, especially defensively. I thought I really took a leap forward. Still not elite, but getting better defensively. Hey, I can block shots in this league, I came out of the college basketball labeled as a defensive bust, and all of a sudden I'm starting to block shots and figure things out. So that was all great. And yeah, I was just really, really excited that I started to really put some numbers up that were kind of what I should have been as a number one pick, right? So that's how all that went. So we finished that season, once again, fly home as soon as I could. So trainer Steve had been in and out as well during that season. I'll break down how his relationship worked and how all that worked. But I was up for an extension that off-season. So 2008 off-season, there was an Olympics coming up in Beijing. I was also up for an extension. So I could do an extension with my own team. Could only negotiate with the Milwaukee Bucks, no one else, but I could do an extension. So for those that aren't familiar with the way the NBA works, your home team gets dibs a year before you go to free agency to try and extend you and keep you there. So it's supposed to be, the rule's supposed to be there to try and stop big clubs from coming in and poaching, and gives your home club a year head start before anyone can talk to you. I think it's a pretty good rule for the most part, especially off rookie deals. And a lot of times players will ever rarely turn down that extension because there's a lot of risk, you get hurt or things change, right? So with the extension, I'm just going to take you through the numbers, how it all went. So we started talking, I can't remember when it was, would have been June, July, somewhere around there. And I was, the Boomers were starting training camp. So my agent was like, you cannot get on a court and play 5-on-5 until you sign this extension or until we know you're not signing it. We don't want to risk you getting hurt while you're in negotiations for that. They find out you're hurt and then they say, we're not going to extend you, we're just going to wait. And, I was still contracted for that following year, but this extension was going to kick in 2 years. So it was a 5-year deal that we ended up doing, and it was kicking in 2 years' time. So if that makes sense. So we go back and forth. We had a number in mind, and how do we get to a number? We look at other bigs. Al Jefferson was one. There was a few other guys we looked at the time, which I had, similar numbers, if not better than, overall, basically averaging a double-double. So you kind of look at them and say, well, he's making this much, we want roughly that. I think Bynum, that might have been a bit later. Bynum came after me. But yeah, anyway, we'll compare it to bigs similar to me. But end up, they come out and offer. I was always around 5 years, 60 million was kind of what I thought was fair. I didn't want to go. My agent was like pushing, maybe we can get you to 70. And I said, look, I'm happy. He goes, what are you happy with? I said, look, 5 years, 60, 12 million a year is something I never would have dreamed of. That's perfect for me. I think that's fair for both sides, looking at what Al Jefferson got, looking at what other guys got. And they opened with 5 years, 50 million offer, which wasn't horrible, but it was a bit lower than, so we opened with 5 years, 75, and they're like, nah, it's preposterous, and then negotiations start, right? We get to a point where they go, final offer, 5 years, 55 million, 11 a year. And I said, you know what, I'll back myself. I'll just, if you can't come up with the extra 5, which is my min, I'll back myself and go play another year or two and then go to free agency. There was obviously a lot of bigs getting paid at that point in the NBA, that year in the NBA. So I knew at minimum I'm going to get what they're offering, and I could up it even more. So they said, all right, cool. Well, that's it. That's all we're offering. So hang up. And these are pretty stressful conversations, right? So, I'm mid-workout and my agent's like, whenever I call you, I don't care what you're doing, you need to answer. So it was about a week period of negotiations. So literally working out with Steve and hear the phone ring, have to stop the workout and go and answer it. And then, so I said, look, to my agent, David, I said, my minimum is 5 years, 60, 12 a year. He goes, okay, that's your minimum. I mean, that's you'll take that if you get that. I said, yeah, I'll take that if I get that. And he goes, they're only offering 55. Let me see what I can do. So I don't hear from him for a day or two, and I'm like, oh, there goes that. And then he calls. I don't know if I was mid-workout or no, I was finished my workout. He calls and goes, congratulations, they're going to come up to 5 years, 60. And being the arsehole that I am, I go, no, I don't want it anymore, man. I want 5 years, 75 now. Like, the fact they disrespected me and waited this long, I don't want that deal anymore. And it goes dead silent on the phone. Dead silent. And after like five or 6 seconds, David's like, Andrew, are you being serious? I said, yeah, man, this is bullshit. I'm not tolerating this. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? And I was like, oh, I'm just joking, man. I'll take it. Thanks, man. And he's like, you fucking asshole. You had me going. And he tells a story still to this day because, he was still figuring out my personality of sarcasm and being a dick sometimes. And that was just one of them. But yeah, anyway, we agree in principle. So I still haven't worked out with the Boomers. They're in camp. I can't get on the court yet. So now the next step is get on a plane as soon as possible, get over there, do the physical, sign the deal, and then I can get back to the next phase of my off-season, which was playing in the Olympics. So I basically fly over there by myself, get on a plane the next day, fly over there, meet with Senator Cole, who was the Milwaukee Bucks owner at the time, former senator of Wisconsin, mind you. Sign the deal, do the physical, everything gets ticked off. Great, happy days, fly back to Australia. And then the bullshit somewhat starts because that thing is, it's one of the highest paid athletes in Australia at current upon that signing, even though the Australian media had no idea I wasn't making it for another 2 years. I was still on my rookie deal, but front page of the paper, I really struggled with everyone knowing how much I earned. I just, as a young fella, I felt like a walking dollar sign at times. And that just goes with, goes with the grain, goes with the game. Like it's, everyone knows what you're earning. So you're like, is this guy talking to me because he wants to be friends? Is this an old friend that's popped up because of who I am or because I've just signed a contract for 5 years, 60, and he saw it in the paper? Or is he actually trying to be a friend and reminisce about the old times? Like you ask all those questions, new family members pop up out of nowhere, all that stuff, right? So that you've heard those stories countless amounts of times. I don't have to bore you with them. Fly back to Australia, and now we get to Steve, my trainer, right? So I had him on a smaller contract at the time, which was equal to probably a part-time job, a well-paid part-time job, mind you. It was roughly between $40,000 and $50,000 a year at the time. He'd only been with me on a pay packet from me for a year or two. Now, I remember when he trained me as a kid, my dad paid him really good money, cash in hand, cash, mate, cash, to train me as a young fella, and we didn't have a lot of money, so that was a lot for my father to do. So he was always compensated for his work. He was never really doing freebies to an extent. He was always compensated for his work. And so anyway, he was on about 40 to 50K US at the time. My whole plan was he's part-time. So basically 2 to 3 months a year, 4 to 5 hours a day per week in the off season, we're training together on weekdays and maybe a Saturday morning. So he's probably putting in 20 hours odd work per week in the off season for me around then. And then in season, he's basically not doing much at all. He'd come to Milwaukee, say I had a little bad stint playing wise, I needed some mentorship, I needed some help. I'd fly him out for 2 weeks. We'd go and work out, we'd go to the facility at night outside of club organised sessions and get some extra work in. And it'd be maybe 3 blocks of 2 weeks per season. So that's another 6 weeks and that's it. The rest of the time, he was free to go and do whatever he wanted. He still trained kids at night. So not a lot of money in today's sense, but back then it was still a decent salary. But my plan was always, I'm just going to tread water with this. And then remember, I had that facility that I was building. So this is another year on with that facility. It was getting nicer and nicer every off season. I came home, I spruced it up, put padding on the walls, put new baskets up, put a couple of extra baskets, put a curtain down that separated the weight room from this, and blah 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 blah. Made it nicer every year I came back. I don't like that. Let's fix that, and we'd fix it, right? So my plan was that once that was fully firing, that he would run that thing full time. He'd still be my full-time trainer or part-time trainer, but I'd morph him into full-time salary, and it would have been a six-figure deal to run a basketball academy. And then he would have had people under him that if he had to come and fly to the US for 2 or 3 weeks to see me, someone could still have the academy be functional while he's gone. So kind of an assistant trainer to him. That was kind of my plan. And I was new to all this, how to do it, employment agreements, insurance, blah, 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 blah. I had no idea, flying blind into all this shit, right? So that was my plan. And that was going to probably would have eventuated either after the Olympics or probably would have been the year after. That would have been the 08, 09 off season when I would have offered him that deal. But I started, 40 to 50K plus expenses. He didn't pay any expenses when he would come visit in the US. Doesn't pay for a meal. He's got accommodation at our house. He's got a car to drive if he needs it. Doesn't pay for flights. Hung out with us, partied with us at times, whatever. Rockstar lifestyle, like basically entourage style, but as a coach, right? So definitely had some good times, and he enjoyed coming over. I enjoyed having him there. But as I started to talk about, I want you to, run the academy one day. What do you think about that? This, that. I was getting a feel that he didn't want to do it. I was getting a feel that I think he became accustomed to the life of being an NBA trainer individually and a hanger-on. And because don't forget, outside of the training times, he's still with us 24/7. We go to nice restaurants after games. You're kind of he's that training camp, I believe, with Larry Kaye's coach, they let him on the court to help rebound and whatnot, and so he was heavily involved in networking and meeting elite coaches in the NBA. So there were a lot of perks to his role in his job, a job that anyone would have wanted, right? But the pay wasn't at a level where he's going to retire. He had a family, a wife, and a young child, and I was aware of that. Wife worked, and that's why I was like, I'm looking towards the academy for you and 6 figures, and you can live comfortably and all that kind of stuff. But I got to feel like he didn't really want to do it, right? So when I signed my extension, I decided that, look, I'm going to do something I was thinking about on the plane ride over, plane ride back. What can I do for Steve as a thank you? No strings attached. So the cars that he drove were beat up, $1,000, barely roadworthy cars like rust. Not good cars, right? So I go, I'm gonna go buy him a nice Holden, just a Holden Commodore, I believe it was a Holden Calais. I'll buy him a nice Holden Calais, 40, 50 grand. I had a friend of mine at a dealer, got us a deal on it, and then I remember picking it up and getting it dropped off, and come outside, I got something for you. It comes outside, and he's like, oh, that's great, thank you, really appreciate it. But he didn't really seem overly excited by it. He was like, oh, it's great, thank you. Leading up to me getting in that car, he was somewhat dropping little one-liners about he just bought a house and I think he overcapitalized on it. Oh, I'm struggling financially, and throwing little things out like that every now and then. Right? I don't know if I can be your trainer anymore. I just can't do it. I might have to get a full-time job. Just throwing that kind of stuff out. And I was aware of it, and I was like, let me play a little bit of game here and see what happens. See what he's gonna do. Whether he's gonna do something silly, whether he goes and gets another job, calls my bluff and makes me sign him for makes me contract him now instead of a year time, right? So he was kind of prodding and prepping me before I signed my contract, right? So we get back, and like I said, I buy him a car, and I thought it was a very nice gesture. And literally within a day of me buying that fucking car for him, he goes to me, hey man, I'm gonna have to sell the car because I need the money for the house, or I need the money to live, or whatever, right? And I'm like, I knew that wasn't the case. Like, his wife worked, they weren't struggling like that. I know for a fact they weren't, but it was all a game to see, what he can do, get his value up. It's a negotiation somewhat that he's starting to have with these little jabs, and he knew that he was valuable to me in my times of need, and that's what fucking pissed me off is he played on that. He knew that when I was having a bad 2-3 week run in the NBA, I would call him on the phone, bring him over, we'd go do some work, he'd give me some stern words and pump me back up, and back on the plane he went, I'd start playing good again. So he knew he had a chess piece in the game, a valuable chess piece. So he knew Andrew needs me. Like, he needs me, so I can kind of play this a little bit and get my value up, which is part of the negotiation. Just be honest about it, right? Don't throw out the one-liners, and don't tell me you're going to sell a car the day after I buy it for you as a nice gesture. And I just basically said, look, if that's what you want to do, I'm not going to stop you doing it. But I said, just be patient, man. We're gonna set up this academy. We're going to get things right. We're going to set up something in Melbourne that hadn't to that point been set up like the way I was planning to set it up. Like we see all these academies these days, but this was going to be set up proper. And I still, like I said, outside of the relationship we had off the court, how it ended, which we'll get to eventually, he's a very good trainer, very, very good basketball trainer, especially for young kids to teenage, that 11, 12 to 16, 17. Fantastic. Really, really good. And, I knew that he'd be one of the best in Australia as far as development and getting things out of kids, and he was really good there. So that all went on. So I decided, I'm going to hold off on offering the contract. For a year or two, like I said, I was planning on doing it in 2009. Let's get through another year in the NBA. And then I signed that extension. So the heat started to get on a little bit more. And I decided to just let it play out. Like I said, I'm a true believer in, if you make people wait long enough for something they think they're entitled to, they're going to do something stupid. They're going to do something silly. And that goes in all walks of life. That's my tip to you people out there, whether it goes business, family, friends. If you make people really have to earn something that they think they're entitled to, and make them wait a little bit longer, one day longer than they think they have to wait, sometimes they'll show their true colors. Unfortunately, that's human nature. So we'll get to that a little bit later and finish that. It's a nice little clickbait tease for you. We'll get to that probably in the next episode because it kicks in after the Olympics at a greater level. The next mission was the Olympics. So we have a few training camps. Oh, let me mention this to you. So we go to some Boomers camps. Just triggered this. This wasn't on my run sheet. We go to a few Boomers camps. One was on the Gold Coast. Brian Gorgon was the head coach. We used to go train at the Southport School, 2 days, and they let Steve be involved with those sessions as well. So once again, another perk of the job. First name basis was Brian Gorgon, knew all the players. They said, we're happy to have you around because, we used to do some extra sessions outside of the national team, whether we go an hour earlier, an hour later, get some shots up, stretch, all that kind of stuff. And he would watch sessions and then, critique my sessions. Hey, you did this on this move. Hey, you're struggling with this. You get whatever, right? Which is great. That's what I wanted. That's why I had him there. Even if he wasn't allowed on the court, which wasn't non-negotiable for me, it was very nice of the Boomers to allow that. Just sitting in the stands, I wanted him to, dissect what's going on and things we can work on. Like, hey, that hook shot's kind of, blah, blah, blah. We need to tweak that in the training session the next day. So anyway, we're walking from a restaurant one night, mid-camp, and there's a group of young, intoxicated guys. And I guess they say they're walking behind me and I'm 7 foot tall and, unfortunately there's people out there that think they're comedians with tall people. I've been through that a million times and they'll throw little, jibes at you that you can kind of half hear and this and that and look at that tall bastard, blah, 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 blah. That, some of it's larrikinism, some of it's trying to make you feel like shit, some of them's trying to make you, they might be small and they feel like shit, so they're trying to big note themselves to their friends, whatever the reason, right? And they kept going and going and going. And I turned around and I was like, dude, like, that's enough, man. Just get on with your night. A few profanities laced in there. Just get on with your night, piss off, just keep it moving. And it went back and forth, they said a few things. And then Steve, my trainer, just basically one guy fronted up to him and he just open hand slapped this man. Like you see the Will Smith, Chris Rock slap. This was nothing on that. This thing floored the guy, floored him. So I'm like, okay, here we go. It's about to kick off. There was 3 or 4 of them, 2 of us. So they start running it at him and he's swinging and he gets clocked. A guy who runs in from the side tries to clock him. I grab that guy by the throat in just like a straight arm chokehold, hand around his throat. Straight arm though, right? And it's like something from a cartoon character. This dude's like swinging at me, but he can't reach me because my wingspan. And that's generally what I did in most scuffles that I ever got in. I would just try to keep guys at bay. And I'm like, mate, calm down, calm down, calm down. He had a bottle in his hand, Jim Beam bottle or something. I was just worried about. I was just looking at his hand like this guy's going to try to bottle me. I'm like, calm down. He's like, get your mate off our mate, get your mate off our mate. And then I guess the 3rd or 4th guy ran in from the side and clocked Steve, like literally clocked him from the side. And then it all kind of broke. The scuffle kind of broke down and then they ran off and he ended up having a massive shiner, eye closed over, and then still had to be part of the training camp, right? So so we get to training the next day. Everyone's like, what the hell happened to you? And he's like, tripped and fell, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't the case. The reason why I bring this up was some of that I think was, I wouldn't say it was planned, but it was done in a way that it was like, look this is, mind you, right in the midst of our negotiation about, long-term contract, all that kind of stuff. Look what I did for you. Look what I would do for you. I think there was some of that psychologically in this. And you might think I'm crazy, but when I get to the crux of this, you understand why. I think there was a portion of it that was like, I'm going to defend him, but I'm also going to show him I've always got his back. You have to pay me. I've always got your back. I think that was more the motivation than just like, hey, these guys are being dickheads, I'm going to crack them. So just a small little note with that. But anyhow, we then move on to the Olympics. I couldn't do all the camp, so I was kind of a little bit behind the 8 ball, caught up pretty quickly. We didn't have a great Olympics by any means. We had a pretty shitty group or a tough group, so it was not an easy group to get out of. So our group, unfortunately, was Lithuania, Argentina, Croatia. So just those 3 teams alone, you're like, oh shit. Us, Australia, Russia and Iran. We opened the tournament versus Croatia and they smack us 97-82. I played like shit, played horrible. We weren't in the game from the start. We're down by 20 at halftime and just never really got back in the game. They punched us in the face straight away. Then we play Argentina, who I believe they won, well, they came runners up or top 4 in 2006 Worlds. I think they won the 2004 Olympic Games. I might stand corrected, but I believe they were a top 2, top 3 team. They punched us by a fair bit, 85 to 68. Didn't play that well. Paddy Mills had a coming out party that night, put his name on the map for the first time to people out in Australia, 22 points, played very, very well. So we're on 2 at this point. We're like, holy shit. We knew we had to get one of those 2 games to try and get top 3 because our crossover pool was the US. And the US pool, unfortunately, we knew that they were going to finish 1. And they ended up finishing 1. So we're trying to avoid 4 at all costs because 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3 in the crossovers. So we're 0-2, and now we're like, oh my God, we need to get some wins on the board here, otherwise we're in some trouble. So we get Iran, 3rd game of the tournament, and we smacked them. They weren't very good. We beat them 106 to 68. So we knew we were going to get that one. Game 4 for us was very, very important. It was Russia. So we knew that 4th spot was going to be out of us and Russia for the most part. Lithuania were 4-0 at that point, so they were top of the table. And we knew that even if we beat them the last game, it wouldn't change much for Lithuania and us. So we knew if we lose to Russia, we're out of the top 8. We're not going to the next round. So this is my best game of the tournament. I had 22-8, played really well, and we absolutely punched Russia 95 to 80. So now we're 2-2, salvageable. We've got a chance. But we knew game 5 was against Lithuania, and the game didn't matter. The game did not matter. Like we could have lost that and finished 2-3. And even if Russia tied with us 2-3 in the 5th spot, we would have had the head-to-head. So we locked up 4th, and we couldn't really move up any more than that because Croatia had the head-to-head with us, and so did Argentina. And Lithuania were clear number 1. But we ended up punching Lithuania, so I'm not sure if they were really somewhat trying to win that game, but we played really well. I had another really good game that game at 23 and played pretty well. And 106 to 75, absolutely punched them. 3-ball was rolling for Bogues in that tournament. I think I was top 3 in 3-point field goal percentage. Believe it or not, I shot the piss out of it, shot it really well. And anyway, we get what we were trying to avoid. We get the US in the first round of the quarterfinals. They absolutely destroy us, 116 to 85. They punch us. We were kind of in the game early, 25-24 in the first quarter, and then down by 11 at halftime, and then 3rd quarter they just annihilated us. I did my ankle really bad, turned it on a 180, blew up straight away. I was out of the game pretty much in the first half, and the game was pretty much over at that point. So disappointed that, look, we at that phase of Boomers culture, there was no one that had a belief that we would even come close to beating the United States. This was the infamous Redeem team. Kobe Bryant, top scorer with 25. They had LeBron James, T. Williams, Dwayne Wade, Chris Paul. The list is endless. They were a tough team, very athletic, and they were the old school US team that would meet you at half court defensively and just create so much havoc with their turnovers. So they ended up knocking us out, and it was all she wrote. We were out of there, and we were kind of an unknown still on that team. We didn't have a lot of known names. I mean, myself and Chris Anstey were the bigger names. Paddy Mills was unknown at that point, still with St. Mary's. Joe Ingles was unknown, South Dragons. He made that team. Brad Newley was around. CJ Bruton was there. Dave Barlow, Mark Worthington, Glenn Saville. David Anderson had a great career in Europe, came back and performed pretty well. Matt Nielsen and Sean Redditch was the team that made up the Boomers. Head coach was Brian Gorge and assistants Brendan Joyce and Gordon McLeod. But it was, I guess a top 8 finish for us was really somewhat a success. It was a disappointment that we got 4th. So a top 8 finish with a legitimate chance to win a quarterfinal. So we would have crossed over maybe against somebody else. We probably had more of a chance and would have been a bit more happier. But the fact that we just squandered those first 2 games against Croatia and Argentina and in the Olympics and a World Championship, it's kind of changed now a little bit. But if you start off poorly, very, very hard to recover. And even if you do, you're crossing over against the best team in the other group. So this basically finishes this episode of the My Journey podcast. Like I said, so the Olympics finish, and it basically has me flying back to the US for scans on my ankle, most importantly. Nothing came up too sinister. They just said you need a couple of weeks off it and then start a rehab protocol. It shouldn't be out longer than a month. So I was ready for training camp. Wasn't a problem. Fly back to Australia, do my rehab, and then heading back over to the US would be myself and Steve. Steve came to every training camp because, like I said, he'd sit in the stands and take notes and whatnot. And funnily enough, we just hired a new head coach in Scott Skiles, the notorious Scott Skiles, just coming on from the Chicago Bulls, hard-nosed, no-nonsense type of guy Heard a lot about him, the kind of coach that your bum tightens up a little bit when he's in the room because he's no nonsense. So I was looking forward to that and seeing him and getting ready for what would be my 2008-2009 NBA season with my fourth year with an extension that I just signed. So that's where we'll kick off next episode, and shit's about to hit the fan. So stay tuned for that next episode. I'll start writing that in the next couple of weeks and get it up there. But appreciate everyone following the My Journey series. I know these take a while to get out sometimes, but doing my best, and I hope you're enjoying them. Maybe I'll do a Q&A on the Calling app regarding specifically the My Journey for those of you who followed it. So if you would like that, please let me know on the socials. Please share this. If you haven't caught up with all episodes, scroll up through all the other nonsense podcasts that I do along the way and find the My Journey. I know some people specifically only listen to this one, and thanks for the support. I appreciate that. And like I said, next episode is going to get real. Might get some newspaper articles out of that next episode, I can tell you that much. But thanks again, and we will see you next time on the My Journey series.